He didn't lose his partner. He lost his identity. For 13 years, Mike Brewer stood in front of the camera as one half of the most watched automotive show on British television. And then one morning in 2017, he woke up to find himself cast as the villain of his own story. No warning, no joint statement, just Edd China alone on YouTube, telling the world he was done, and millions of fans deciding Mike was the reason why. What followed wasn't just professional fallout. Death threats reached his front door, his teenage daughter got targeted, police got involved, and the man who built Wheeler Dealers from a garage in South London into a global television brand found himself wondering if any of it had been worth it. This is the story of Mike Brewer, the deals, the split, the silence that followed, and the question that still haunts automotive television. What actually happened behind those garage doors? Roger Brewer ran a car customizing shop in Lambeth, South London, and his son Mike spent childhood absorbing everything about the industry before he could legally drive anything on it. Born on August 28, 1964, Mike didn't stumble into cars the way most enthusiasts do. The obsession arrived at birth, wrapped in engine grease and the smell of metal shavings. What separated him from his father, though, wasn't mechanical talent. It was his mouth. From the time he started trading second-hand vehicles as a teenager, Mike understood that the deal mattered as much as the car itself, and he had a natural ability to read people, negotiate hard, and still leave everyone feeling like they'd won. That skill pulled him toward television faster than any talent scout could have managed. Shows like Deals on Wheels and Pulling Power gave him early exposure in the late 90s, and audiences responded immediately. He wasn't performing enthusiasm for cars. The enthusiasm was genuine, which made the difference between a presenter people tolerated and one they actually wanted to watch. By 2003, Mike had a bigger idea. Not just another motoring show with pretty vehicles and shallow commentary, but something that showed the full arc of a car's second life. Buy it rough, fix it properly, sell it for a profit, and take viewers through every step. That concept became Wheeler Dealers, and the only thing the format needed to work was someone on the mechanical side who could match Mike's energy without competing with it. Edd China was the answer, though on paper the pairing made no obvious sense. Tall, measured, and methodically brilliant, Edd operated at a completely different frequency than Mike's cockney speed-talking dealmaker energy. Where Mike filled silence with patter and personality, Edd filled it with technical precision and genuine mechanical love. Audiences saw through the chemistry immediately, and Wheeler Dealers found its audience fast. The early UK seasons had an almost documentary quality to them, with Mike hunting down battered Minis, Triumphs, and Fords, while Edd walked viewers through restorations with the patience of someone who genuinely wanted them to understand the process. Nothing felt manufactured. The tension came from the work itself, from seized bolts and blown gaskets and budgets that kept threatening to collapse, not from artificial drama invented in an editing suite. Viewers across the world responded to that honesty, and the show inspired a generation of enthusiasts who went out to buy project cars of their own specifically because Wheeler Dealers made the process feel achievable. Mike had built the concept, Edd had built the credibility. Together, they built something that outlasted almost everything else on automotive television. The American move in 2013 changed the equation in ways that weren't immediately visible. Discovery saw opportunity in the US market, and from a business standpoint, the logic was obvious. Bigger cars, bigger budgets, bigger audience. Mike adapted without hesitation, navigating muscle cars and vintage pickups with the same confidence he'd shown on cobblestone British forecourts. The American viewers took to him, and the ratings reflected that. But the production environment in the States ran at a different pace, with tighter schedules and a format that increasingly prioritized momentum over methodology. The step-by-step mechanical segments that had defined the show's identity in its early years started getting cut in post-production, not eliminated, but trimmed, shortened, repositioned from the center of the show to a supporting role. For Mike, who understood television as a business, these were necessary adaptations. For Edd, who had built his entire contribution around the integrity of those technical explanations, the cuts represented something closer to an erasure. The tension didn't explode overnight. It accumulated slowly across seasons, showing up in small ways that crew members noticed before anyone else. Days where the two barely acknowledged each other between shots, creative conversations that stopped happening naturally and started requiring mediation, philosophical disagreements that neither man could fully articulate on camera but that both felt constantly off it. When Edd uploaded his departure video in 2017, the calm in his delivery made it worse somehow. He wasn't angry, he wasn't accusatory. He simply explained that after 13 years, creative differences with the network had made continuing impossible, and that the reduction of mechanical content had become something he couldn't work around. The announcement landed without warning, at least not the kind that Mike could have prepared for. There was no joint statement, no coordinated farewell, no conversation between partners about how to handle the moment publicly. Just Edd, a camera, and the internet. The fan response moved from shock to fury within hours. Message boards flooded with accusations. Social media posts directed blame at Mike with the certainty of people who had decided the story before reading it. The assumption, shared loudly across platforms, was that Mike had either sided with the network against Edd or actively contributed to pushing him out. What started as criticism escalated quickly into something uglier. Threats arrived. Mike's teenage daughter got targeted by people who framed their rage as passion for a television show. Police protection became necessary. The experience gutted him in ways that the public version of Mike Brewer, always smiling and ready with a quip, couldn't fully absorb or express. He never fired back publicly. In interviews, he acknowledged disappointment in how the departure unfolded while consistently stopping short of attacking Edd directly. Privately, those close to the situation described a man who felt genuinely betrayed, not because Edd left, but because of how the leaving happened. 13 years of shared work, shared success, and shared identity felt like it deserved a different kind of ending than a solo YouTube video. The silence that followed between the two men wasn't hostile in any explicit way. Neither threw accusations, neither ran to tabloids with insider damage. But the absence of any reconciliation, any joint acknowledgement of what they'd built, left a space that fans filled with speculation and resentment, most of it directed at Mike. Behind the professional composure he maintained for cameras, crew members observed real deterioration, panic attacks that people around him hadn't seen before, a guardedness that replaced his natural openness, a man recalculating what fame actually costs when the audience that built you decides to unmake you. Ant Anstead arrived as the replacement, and the comparison started immediately. A former police officer with genuine restoration expertise, Ant brought intelligence and warmth to the co-host role, and over time a meaningful portion of the audience warmed to the new dynamic. The chemistry with Mike was different from what he'd shared with Edd, but it worked on its own terms, and Mike adjusted his rhythm accordingly. Mark Elvis Priestley followed after Ant, a former Formula One mechanic whose technical background and low-key personality gave the show yet another flavor. Through each transition, Mike remained the constant, the anchor, the man whose name had always been attached to the brand and who kept showing up regardless of what the internet said about him between seasons. Off-screen, he channeled energy into projects with veterans and community garages, kept showing up at classic car events, and maintained a presence in automotive culture that existed entirely outside the television show. The work became a way of holding on to something that felt solid when the public perception of him shifted underneath his feet without warning. The reunion question surfaces every time either man does a public appearance, and the answer from both sides has stayed carefully non-committal for years now. Mike has left the door open with measured optimism, acknowledging that life is long and that possibilities exist without promising anything. Edd has spoken about the importance of what they created while making clear that his priorities now center on creative independence rather than institutional television. Pride plays a role. History plays a bigger one. What they built together between 2003 and 2017 reshaped automotive television permanently, and the fallout from how it ended left damage that a single reunion special couldn't fully repair. Fans still want it. The appetite hasn't faded the way these things usually do. Something about the specific chemistry of those two men in that specific format connected with people deeply enough that the loss still registers years later. What nobody expected was that the absence would matter more than most television presences ever do. Mike Brewer's story resists clean resolution, and that's precisely what makes it worth understanding. He started as a street-smart trader with a gift for conversation, built one of the most watched car shows in television history, watched the partnership that defined it collapse publicly and painfully, absorbed a wave of hostility that touched his family and genuinely frightened him, and kept going anyway. Not because the original show survived intact, it didn't, but because walking away would have meant conceding something about himself that he wasn't willing to concede. The legacy is complicated and entangled with Edd's in ways that can't be separated cleanly, and Mike has made his peace with that reality, even if the public hasn't fully done the same. Wheeler Dealers changed what automotive television could be. Mike Brewer built that, survived the worst version of its collapse, and is still standing. That counts for something. The chapter isn't finished yet.